large institutions are purchasing Bitcoin at kind of an insane rate, to be honest, especially Strategy. They went from 200,000 Bitcoin to over 500,000 Bitcoin extremely quickly. Bitcoin doesn't work the same way as gold or the US dollar. Centralizing it and putting all the keys in control of one custodian or entity is just categorically less secure than leveraging the native properties of Bitcoin, multi-signature, with keys distributed. And we crossed that pivotal price of 100,000 US dollars, which even just a few years ago seemed like a pipe dream. You know, I would tell people that I was meeting, oh yeah, I think Bitcoin's going to cross $100,000, and they would look at me like I was crazy. I've been in Bitcoin for quite a while, but it just feels like this year in particular, it's very true because of how optimistic the future is for Bitcoin.
Hi, Phil. Thanks for being on again.
Robin, I'm so happy to be back.
Really, really cool to have you on. I've thought a lot about what I should ask guests that have been on again for the first question, and I actually got some really cool feedback from the community because I asked that question last time I had someone on again, and they came up with like 5 good questions, but I want to keep it with just one to not use too much time there. And the most interesting one I found was, since you last been on the podcast, what have you learned from Bitcoin? And I think you have been on about a year ago, something like that.
Well, in the last year, Bitcoin has changed really dramatically in the US at least. So since the last time we were on, you know, a U.S. strategic Bitcoin reserve was established. Ross Ulbricht was freed from prison. Donald Trump, of course, was reelected president. And we crossed that pivotal price of 100,000 US dollars, which even just a few years ago seemed like a pipe dream. You know, I would tell people that I was meeting, oh yeah, I think Bitcoin's going to cross $100,000, and they would look at me like I was crazy. Now, they definitely don't look at me with that same type of skepticism. And I've had to revise my pitch and say, yeah, I think Bitcoin's going to go to 1 million one day. So the question was, what have I learned about Bitcoin? And I think the thing that I've learned the most over the last year is just that Bitcoin never does what you expect it to do. And maybe, you know, I've learned that I've been in Bitcoin for quite a while, but it just feels like this year in particular, it's very true because of how optimistic the future is for Bitcoin. You know, with all these things that have transpired, Strategy hitting 500,000 Bitcoin, U.S. strategic Bitcoin reserve established, the Operation, choke point things kind of falling to the wayside in the U.S. I would expect the price to be a lot higher, and it's been a muted cycle so far, although it has crossed that pivotal $100,000 price. So maybe that's not the most prophetic or profound thing that I've learned, but it's always surprising that just Bitcoin never does what I anticipated to do.
Yeah, it's super. And just because you said it, I thought about it. When I last year started, I had a space running, where Seyr with Strategy B or MicroStrategy back then, still had under 210,000 Bitcoin. And we were like, oh, will he get to like this 1% of the supply? And then I don't know, maybe he'll get there this year. And it's so fascinating to see just this execution and these new ways of coming up with buying Bitcoin, and now like this crossing 500,000 Bitcoin on the balance sheet. It's unbelievable actually for me, and it kind of shows how this cycle is like really big on institutions and retail, at least from what I see. Maybe you have other insights from Unchained. Retail is kind of sleeping on this cycle.
I definitely notice that the general public is still very asleep when it comes to Bitcoin. On the Unchained side of the house, we've surpassed some really major milestones in the last year. So Unchained helps long-term Bitcoin savers secure, manage, and grow their Bitcoin with a suite of financial services that are built on top of collaborative custody multi-signature, where clients control keys. And just in the last year, we surpassed 100,000 Bitcoin secured on the platform and over 900 million US dollars of commercial loans originated. So some really major milestones that have we've crossed. And, we help thousands and thousands and thousands of clients. So our client count has definitely grown a lot. But I do agree with you that, if you're walking down the street, Bitcoin is still regarded, people know about Bitcoin at this point, but there's definitely still that skepticism, or there's a lack of interest. And I'm not sure what it is that will pique their interest. I thought crossing $100,000 would have definitely moved the needle, but, and we did see a decent bump in new users when that milestone was crossed. But now that we're, 20% lower, I'm very surprised that we're not seeing more volumes. And volumes are good, but they're not, it's not like a major bull run volume.
People that watch my podcast all the time might be bored of that statistics, but I bring it up a lot. I really like to see at Google Trends, like with the search term buy Bitcoin, and see how it has been developing. And if you just compare that to 2021 and to especially 2017, we are crazy low, like 7% of where we were with December 2017. Then people bring up like, oh, nobody's searching anything anymore. But yeah, they look YouTube. And actually, it does make a difference. If you look at the YouTube volume, and YouTube is the biggest video platform currently, it is a little bit better where we currently are. Would be super fun also to see statistics of like ChatGPT and other AI tools that kind of come up with like, but they don't have that history of data. But it just shows me that the price currently is mostly driven, at least what I see, from institutions and retail, at least also from my like, when I go on in the family where there's no Bitcoiner, they really don't care that Bitcoin hit 100K. Like they hit the new all-time high. We have seen it before. We heard it before. We still think it's bad for the environment.
Right. And I think the last time we recorded, either the ETFs had just released or they were just about to be released. And so, yeah, it's a totally different paradigm right now for Bitcoin. And I completely agree with you. The large institutions are purchasing Bitcoin at kind of an insane rate, to be honest, especially Strategy. They went from 200,000 Bitcoin to over 500,000 Bitcoin extremely quickly. And something that kind of keeps me up at night is all of these major institutions accumulating with quite a serious centralization of custodians, right? So most of the ETFs in the US use Coinbase for custody. Coinbase is becoming a larger and larger and larger honeypot for attackers. And, regardless of how amazing their security is, just having a single place that you can go and compromise to cause a catastrophic loss of Bitcoin is becoming, I think, a growing concern for me.
Is it a concern for the price action or actually also for Bitcoin itself?
Bitcoin will survive either way. And in fact, Bitcoin will emerge stronger if large centralized custodians are attacked and compromised, because alternative solutions like a network of keys, collaborative custody, multi-sig, self-custody become more and more obvious. And once those are adopted, Bitcoin becomes even more anti-fragile. So Bitcoin, I think, just in general, is a very anti-fragile form of money, where any sort of attacks might cause damage in the short term or slow adoption, but the people who stick it out and survive end up getting much more resilient and stronger. So even if, the largest custodians are attacked, I think it will set Bitcoin's adoption back a little bit, but Bitcoin will grow much stronger as a result of it, because every time a custodian like that runs into an issue, it teaches the market something really important, that, hey, Bitcoin doesn't work the same way as gold or the US dollar. Centralizing it and putting all the keys in control of one custodian or entity is just categorically less secure than leveraging the native properties of Bitcoin, multi-signature, with keys distributed. If keys were more distributed among different custodians, even if the individual himself isn't holding a key, then if exchange A is hacked and their key is compromised, 0 Bitcoin is lost, right? Compare that to today. If an exchange is attacked and compromised, significant funds are lost. Just a month or so ago, Bybit was hacked for $1.5 billion of, it was Ethereum, but it just goes to show that centralizing control of keys with a third party is not the ideal long-term solution for Bitcoin security.
And from what I don't know if this is actually true. I never checked it, but I saw it in the news where they converted it to Bitcoin. So there was this joke going on, even criminals know you steal Ethereum, but you actually want the Bitcoin, not the Ethereum.
Yeah, criminals need money as well. Everybody needs money. Governments need money. People need money. Unfortunately, criminals also need money. And yeah, I do think, it makes sense that they would get rid of something that is hemorrhaging value measured in Bitcoin, and upgrade it to the world's best form of money. While they're nefarious, they're not idiots, right? So they know what they're doing. And of course, they're going to want to store that value in the world's best form of money.
One thing that I didn't plan, but it's super interesting when we look at self-custody, and then Unchained is doing self-custody with their clients. Where do you think we will end up long term? I don't know if we actually talked about it last time, but it's super interesting because I have a really hard time convincing people of self-custody. Both on my channel, around 50% of my channel is doing self-custody, 50% not. But even more problematic is if I get people to buy Bitcoin in real life, like friends and families, they feel really safe if they are exchanges. They trust in the institutions, it's Austria, they never experienced bank freeze or anything like that. They trust in the institutions and the governments that are in place, which I think is not a clever idea, but it's hard to convince someone of something else. Do you think self-custody is something that can be mainstream of over 50% of users will do it? Or is it always for a side group of people that really want to enhance their own freedom and their sovereignty?
There's a lot to unpack in that question. So what I'll start with is by saying that even today, a vast majority of all of the Bitcoin out there that isn't lost is secured in self-custody. So last time I checked, there was an estimated 3 or 4 million Bitcoin with custodians. There's about 10 million Bitcoin, 10 to 12 million Bitcoin secured in self-custody. And then, 3 to 4 million Bitcoin are lost. So I'm not going to do math on the fly here, but that equals roughly 20 million. And I think that surprises people. Most Bitcoin out there is under the control of, an individual's private keys. So if you, when you get started, it looks the easiest to just set up an account with an exchange, because then you don't really have to learn anything, right? With your bank account, you just upload your information. They deal with all of the dollars or euros, gold, whatever you're securing with the bank, and you don't have to worry too much. Now, with Bitcoin, it's very problematic because Bitcoin is immutable, which means that if Bitcoin is sent to an address, there's no takebacks. And when you set up an account with an exchange, the most common way that people lose Bitcoin is by having their access to their account hacked. So if you're using an email address that gets compromised, what attackers can do is get access to your email and then trick the exchange to send Bitcoin. Log in to the exchange, withdraw Bitcoin, or go through support channels and set up email kind of routing rules that send all the replies to a folder that you might not be aware of. And they can spend months and months doing that. So while setting up an account with an exchange might seem easy, what you're actually securing your Bitcoin with when you do that is your email account. So your email account better be extremely secure. Now, another way, that's one of the risks of working with an exchange. Another risk is the exchange themselves gets compromised, which happens probably every year, probably multiple times every year, in different, exchanges, across different exchanges and in different, especially in DeFi kind of fantasy land. Those are super insecure, but major custodians also run into problems. And so it's almost like a matter of time when it comes to custody. And so as long as as soon as your Bitcoin gets to a point where it's an amount that you really can't afford to lose, I really think you must look into self-custody. And there are ways to do it that are pretty straightforward. You can set up a mobile wallet on your phone, but what you really want to look at for long-term savings is cold storage, which is, either with a hardware wallet or with collaborative custody, which is multi-signature. And multi-signature is Bitcoin addresses that are built from multiple keys that require multiple keys to spend. So for example, 2 of 3, that's what we do at Unchained. The Bitcoin address is built with 3 keys, any 2 of which are needed to move the Bitcoin out of the address. Clients control 2 of the keys. Unchained has 1 of the keys. So if you lose one of your devices, then Unchained is there to step in to sign a transaction. And we found that is an extremely resilient way to store Bitcoin for many years. While the setup might be a little bit more complicated than setting up an account with an exchange, it's really not that bad. Unchained guides clients through it day in and day out, every age, every technical ability. We've worked with clients in their 80s. We've worked with younger clients. We've worked with, self-professed Luddites, right? People who don't know how to use technology. And at the end of the day, if you can protect information decently well, like if you have a filing cabinet that you store your, in the US, we have social security numbers and passports, then you have a good chance of being able to successfully secure a key. It just requires, a little bit of learning. But if Bitcoin is really important to you, it's some of the most valuable learning that you can do. I like to tell people that it's easier than driving a car. Driving a car, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of rules. You're driving a piece of heavy equipment that could, malfunction. You could crash. With Bitcoin, you're writing down some words. You're storing those in a very secure place. And if you're using hardware wallets, you want to be doing kind of routine maintenance checks. So a couple times a year, plugging it in, making sure all the Bitcoin's there, making sure your device is up to date. Really not that challenging once you get over the learning curve.
I couldn't agree more. Like we do so many things that we didn't expect it. Like even on the technical side, how few people knew what an email is, how to log in, the password and usernames, how we use WhatsApp. All those things are learning curves for humanity. And I do hope actually on a larger scale that, the public private key, the cryptography of it, hopefully gets to be more widely used. I think username and password is kind of a bad thing for security wise, and I would like to just use it in many more places. Just a quick side questions. Are you also doing 3 out of 5? And if not, why?
We currently only do 2 out of 3 multi-sig, and it's for a very specific reason. When we get clients set up, clients, like I said, have 2 keys, but each key is actually comprised of a hardware wallet and a seed phrase, right? So as a client, you have 4 items. Unchained has 1 item. You can lose 3 out of 4 of those items and still recover your Bitcoin. So you can lose both seed phrase and a device. And as long as you have 1 device, you can still recover your Bitcoin. We believe that securing seed phrases is foundational to Bitcoin security. So for every key that you want to have a device and a seed phrase. And that's because the hardware wallets themselves are points of failure. We've seen many times throughout the past where a firmware update goes wrong, or the manufacturer, introduces a new feature that is not compatible, where people might be locked out of signing transactions for a period of time. If you have that seed phrase, you can just load that seed phrase onto another device and be on your way. If you don't have a seed phrase, you're trapped. You have to wait until the functionality is available. So 2 of 3 is where we landed because, again, clients are securing 4 items. If we were to increase that to 3 of 5, it would just increase complexity pretty significantly, because you do need to, or you do want to, geographically separate as many of those items as possible. And finding 4 separate locations is already tough. And then increasing that, maybe with another 2 keys, if you want to hold 4 out of 5 keys, for example, just makes it even harder.
It totally makes sense, especially with the seed phrase backup. It's then already almost like a 5 out of 2 setup, because like you need just 1 of 2 of those, where you only have 2 keys, but like you have of 1 key 2 different items that can actually unlock either the hardware wallet with the PIN or the seed phrase on its own. Then it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I would say there's some marginal additional security that you can get from 3 of 5, but that additional security comes with pretty significant additional operational complexity, right? Because you are having to find more secure locations, and then you have to periodically check on everything. You can't just like set Bitcoin and forget it. So you do want to make sure that at least once or twice a year, you're going and checking to make sure that you haven't been compromised. With multi-signature, if one item is compromised, it's not a big deal. You're not losing Bitcoin, but you do need to know so that you can move the Bitcoin into a new address where all of the items are safe.
A lot of sense. The thing that I wanted to, I was sidetracked by myself. I wanted to get towards. There's so much going on currently, and there's so much new things coming up with like the ETFs. We have the 2nd year of the ETF now, the strategic Bitcoin reserve. Institutions are now buying more and more, not just like more companies, but they seem to be also like going heavily and heavier in there. GameStop is now one fun new addition to that.
That's right.
Where do you see the Bitcoin adoption headed in the next couple of years, just looking at the sheer amount of institutional adoption that seems to be unlocked now?
More and more companies are going to have to adopt Bitcoin. I think what they're realizing is that once you account for the money printing, their stock performance or their performance overall as a company is not nearly as good as it might look on paper. The same thing goes with countries, though. I think I'm a little surprised that another country hasn't publicly announced since the US announced the strategic Bitcoin reserve. I know that they're out there, and I know that many countries are working on it, but that's absolutely going to happen because that's how the game theory plays out. Iran isn't going to sit there and let the US accumulate all the Bitcoin. Russia isn't going to sit there and let the US accumulate all the Bitcoin. And then, if countries that are maybe antagonistic to the US start doing it, then other allies are going to start to accumulate Bitcoin. It's how it all plays out. All countries, again, everybody needs money, and Bitcoin is the best form of money. So every country will eventually adopt it.
I do like that a lot. Everyone needs money, and Bitcoin is just the best option for it. And it's just a matter of time till every individual, every nation state, every company, every whatever you want to count there will get towards.
The companies you like, the companies you hate, the countries you like, the countries you hate, they will all ultimately end up adopting it.
Yeah, that's the worst thing about Bitcoin. Your enemies also might adopt it.
That's right. It took me a while to kind of come to this, but it's an unfortunate thing, but it's also maybe one of the most positive things about it is that it is a level playing field. It is neutral, and it has to be neutral in order for it to function. And so, while people who, maybe are using it for nefarious purposes also adopt Bitcoin, the amount of positivity and good that Bitcoin will do for the world vastly outweighs that. And Bitcoin has to work for the people who are criminals in order for it to work for everybody else. And I just believe that most people are well-intentioned and good. And once they have a good form of money, like massive amounts of prosperity will happen.
So interesting. Absolutely. One topic that is super interesting, and I think it would be fun with you to talk about is when we get there, where Bitcoin is the big driver of monetary energy, and all the Bitcoiners that are now earlier in have accumulated a lot of resources, and maybe also like later stage, because like humanity, I think in itself gets wealthier with adopting Bitcoin, not only the earlier ones. Is the question of like, what are we Bitcoiners are doing with those resources? And I think you also have like a personal journey to share.
Well, I think there's a saying, fix the money, fix the world. And it's something that I truly believe. And for a lot of folks who have been in Bitcoin for a while, who've been using Bitcoin as their primary source of savings, there are new opportunities that have kind of emerged, right? You can not only just accumulate, beautiful real estate or, second passports and stuff for yourself and for your family, but you can also start to think about, how do I want to impact the world, right? How do I want to improve things out there? And there are a lot of great organizations that are very Bitcoin aligned. So at Unchained, I mentioned earlier, we do financial services for long-term Bitcoin savers built on top of that multi-sig collaborative custody that we were talking about. A few products that are newer, that have been performing really well for Unchained and just for people are tax advantaged accounts. So IRAs in the US, they're individual retirement accounts. People can, put dollars in to these before taxes have been taken out, before income tax, or you can pay taxes up front and put dollars into what's called a Roth IRA, and the Bitcoin can grow tax-free forever. These moves are really important when you're trying to think about, how to optimize your tax position over the long term. And at the end of last year, we released a brand new product called a donor advised fund, which is a charitable financial product that pairs super nicely with the more traditional, tax advantaged accounts. And the way it works is that if you, have charitable intent, what you can do is you can donate Bitcoin into this donor advised fund, DAF for short. You get a tax write-off immediately for the full fair market value of the Bitcoin, assuming, you qualify and you've worked with your tax professional to make sure that that's all good. And then you can pair that with large taxable events in your personal life, or, for example, those tax advantaged accounts. So if you want to move Bitcoin from a traditional IRA, which taxes haven't been taken out, put it into a post-tax Roth IRA, where it can grow forever without tax capital gains. You can pair that move with a donation and not end up paying any additional taxes for those moves. So there's a lot of really cool tax optimization moves that you can do with the different products at Unchained. And what's great about this Bitcoin DAF, donor advised fund, is, as I mentioned, you donate the Bitcoin. It sits there in this fund where it can grow tax-free. And then over time, you can make grants to different organizations of your choice in US dollars or in Bitcoin. So there's many great Bitcoin organizations around the world that you can grant Bitcoin to. And then for the organizations that are important to you, maybe that aren't ready for Bitcoin, I don't know, your church, your school, something like that, a big, charity that you really enjoy that just doesn't accept Bitcoin yet, you can use this little charitable financial product, the DAF, to hold Bitcoin on their behalf, right? So you donate Bitcoin this year, you get your write-off. the Bitcoin sits there and it grows tax-free. And then you can make grants to Bitcoin organizations and non-Bitcoin organizations or orgs that aren't ready for Bitcoin yet. They can just receive dollars. So it's a super powerful tool. And it's something that, in my Bitcoin journey started to make more sense for me this year. And it's been awesome being able to hold Bitcoin on behalf of some of the organizations I care about, and then also send Bitcoin to the really cool organizations out there that are promoting Bitcoin adoption. So not only do you get that, tax write-off, you're not paying in the US, the IRS more than their share, but you're also using that money to accelerate Bitcoin itself.
That's super interesting. That's probably a US only thing, I presume.
I believe DAFs are US only. There may be interesting charitable financial products like that in Europe, but I'm not aware of.
Let's take a break for a moment and appreciate the beauty that Coin Vigilante has made with the Bitcoin watches. Those watches are the most amazing, the most elegant way of showing that you are a true Bitcoiner. And Coin Vigilante just dropped a completely new and amazing Genesis edition of their watch collections. You have the date of the first ever mined Bitcoin block in there, and of course also the block height and which epoch we are currently in. I love the level of detail they put in this masterpiece. Make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. And now if you have Bitcoin, I really do hope that you don't have it on exchange. But if you do have it on exchange, I have two ways for you to deal with that. The first way is you put it on a hardware wallet. That's the entry for you to get into the self-custody game. I recommend BitBox, Bitcoin only edition for that. It's a super simple and secure way. And if you check out the link in the description, you even get 5% off if you use the code Robin. And the second way is the Bitcoin Way. The Bitcoin Way is your all-in partner in terms of how to get the most out of your sovereignty. They will personalize for you a self-custody setup that is perfect for your individual situation. They will show you how you can secure your own devices. Securing your Bitcoin is not enough. You also have to keep all your devices secure. One topic that is overlooked often is the inheritance plan. What happens with your Bitcoin once you are no longer here? Do you have a plan for that in place already? And last but not least, if you're in jurisdictions where you don't feel safe, it's better to get a plan B. For all that, head over to thebitcoinway.com/Robin to get a 30-minute free call. And just a quick side note, I will be for the first time ever speaking at the Bitcoin Prague event in June. It will be absolutely legendary and I'm really looking forward to seeing all of you there. You can get your ticket in the link down in the description of Bitcoin Prague, and very important, use code Robin to get 10% off your ticket. I'm really looking forward seeing you there. But I think the point stands of like, no matter what product, no matter how the method is going to work, and I think there will come a lot of companies that will offer something like that all over the world. The point is like, Bitcoiners will have a lot of resources or are already having a lot of resources, but like it will only go up from here as Bitcoin only goes up from here long term. And I'm really excited of where the world is going as the Bitcoiners with the resources are influencing decision makers in the political space, in the donor space of like charitable foundations, but also with like companies and with financial decisions on the business side. It will be really cool to see. And this is kind of the fix the money, fix the world where we might actually go. We fix the incentives and we now have Bitcoin, and this could really influence the world in a really interesting direction. I do like that idea a lot.
I really think we saw the influence of Bitcoin, at least in the US, during the US elections. Bitcoin has increased in value so much that some of the earliest adopters have very significant wealth, enough wealth that they can really impact change, both politically as well as charitably, or, professionally, even starting companies, employing people. And it's really cool to see. Now, some of the ideals of Bitcoin they're being pushed onto the general public just by way of how much more prosperous the average Bitcoiner is comparatively. And now that, it's like the golden rule, right? Whoever has the gold makes the rules. So the wealthier Bitcoiners are at this point, they've accumulated such a massive position that they're looking for ways to impact the world. And you can do that, again, politically, by getting Bitcoin aligned politicians elected, by helping, for example, Trump win the election, just by essentially by him saying that he's not going to go after us, right? Whereas previously, I think the previous administrations were a little bit more hostile, a little aggressive to people who are holding Bitcoin. And I think that caused them ultimately to lose the election because it was such a massive single issue for people.
How, I mean, this is a different topic, but how big, because it's from a European standpoint, it's always hard to say from the outside. I see the US only with Bitcoin classes on. So I only hear news from Bitcoiners. So I have a very filtered view of the US. How big or not significant was that Trump actually won for Bitcoin, for the Bitcoin industry, medium term? I mean, long term, we don't care, but short term, this can actually impact people. How bad was it before? And how would you think it would have been different if Harris won?
I tried to avoid getting overly political, but what I will say is you can just pay attention to the SEC cases that have been dropped recently. There were a lot of them, and most of them have been dropped, like Coinbase, Gemini. I'm forgetting. There was a few other ones, but previously, I think that the previous administration was going aggressively after, I think, more the crypto industry than Bitcoin in particular. But unfortunately, Bitcoin always gets looped in with the rest of that junk. So since Trump was elected, I mean, we've seen many of those charges drop. At the same time, unfortunately, we've also seen him, go out there and promote his own meme coin or whatever. So the good and the bad kind of come together in that case. But I do think it was significant. And it's funny, at the beginning of the conversation, we talked about how the general public is still kind of sleeping on Bitcoin. I really would have thought, getting Trump elected would wake them up. But I think that the Bitcoin lobby, we'll call it that, really did have a significant impact in the election. And you can just see, it was essentially a single issue for people who were holding Bitcoin in it. I really do think that a very small number, the intransigent minority, I'm mispronouncing that, was able to basically kind of swing the election.
It's massive that you can already see the impact of Bitcoiners, because it was just a topic that he couldn't ignore anymore. And even I remember Harris being more and more open to the idea of Bitcoin closer to the election, where things came up like we also like crypto.
That's right. I mean, they clearly put out some very neutral sounding language. But at that point, I think it was too little, too late.
Yeah, and the big thing for me was Trump actually came to the Bitcoin conference. Trump actually came to the New York City pub, PubKey, it's called, and going there. And you can think about him whatever you want. I don't have a particular opinion because I'm not forced to vote there. So I never did that, but it's really interesting to see how he got that he has to go there, because he can be at 500 other places at that night, and he goes to a rally, and it's always like cost versus reward balance that he has to thrive, because that evening he could have done a rally with like hundreds of thousands of people. He chose to go a small bar because he knows that will be really significant for the Bitcoin people. And that is, I think, the big news, that he and his team said like, oh no, we have to go there. It's important to win the election.
It's funny, there's a lot of examples of this in Bitcoin where it's like you just need to motivate a small number of people to do something. Like, we were talking earlier about self-custody, for example. Most of the Bitcoin out there is in self-custody. Now, the number of users is probably significant orders of magnitude smaller than the users with exchanges. And it's the same thing, Trump going to PubKey. There were, 100 people in that bar or something. But the influence that bar has on people with very deep pockets made it absolutely worth it for him.
It's super interesting to see that.
Yeah. I'm based in Austin. That's where Unchained's headquarters is. And the general public, you walk down the street, they have no idea that Austin is a hub for Bitcoin stuff internationally. And the amount of Bitcoin here in Austin is mind-blowing. There is a lot of Bitcoin wealth in this city, and most people are totally unaware.
Is Austin the best? Like, it's probably really hard to say, but is Austin kind of the best city for Bitcoin in America?
Absolutely, unquestionably,
unbiased.
Yeah, no biases here. No, I think Austin has a very, very strong community. In the same building as Unchained is Pleb Lab, which does developer, resources. There's Bitcoin Park Austin, formerly the Bitcoin Commons, is based here in Austin. And there's some great companies that with lots of employees here from across the Bitcoin industry. Plus, some of the earliest Bitcoin adopters are based here in Austin. So there's some really amazing people here. Other cities in the US that I think are very strong in Bitcoin, Nashville, New York City, Miami, San Francisco. I think I'm certainly missing a few others, but those are kind of, when I think about big Bitcoin cities in the US, those are the cities that pop in my mind.
Las Vegas soon.
Yeah, soon Vegas. Yeah, we'll storm Vegas, and they'll, after the conference this year, I think they'll just have no other choice. There's going to be so many Bitcoiners there.
I'm really looking forward. I've my biggest conferences I've been was Bitcoin Prague always. I will be at Bitcoin Prague the third time now in a row. I had actually tickets the last 2 years to the Bitcoin conference in Miami and Nashville. There was always something coming in the way. This year I was like, this is a set, like I have to be in the hospital to not go this time. Even if I'm sick, I will fly there and maybe I get get fit again. I would definitely will go there because I just wanna see what's going on. I think and Vegas could be massive. When I hear the organizers talk, it could be really a cool event. You will be probably there, right?
Absolutely. Barring, some life event, I will also be there. I haven't missed one of the Bitcoin conferences. I've been every year since they started in San Francisco in 2019. Was it 3 years in Miami and then Nashville, now Las Vegas? Wouldn't miss it. I mean, it's by far the largest conference that I've ever been to. Just in terms of the production and the number of people, and I think it dwarfs like all other financial conferences in the US and potentially the world. I don't know the world metrics, but definitely dwarfs the other conferences in the US. And it's funny, one of the years in Miami, I was standing in line. There was a bit of a line to get in because it was so popular. And there's these reporters there, and they're like, wow, what do you think about this hour-long line to get into this conference? And they were kind of asking me, a leading question to talk about how, disorganized, quote unquote, the conference was. And I just spun it around and I was like, can you believe that 20,000 people are here in Miami waiting in line for multiple hours to learn about Bitcoin? I don't think that the reporter used that quote or liked that, but that's what's constantly mind-blowing to me, is that so many people from around the entire world are flying to the US for these conferences. And we are getting speakers like presidential candidates. I mean, I never dreamed of dreamed that I would ever go to a political rally, but because we're in Bitcoin, the politicians are coming to us. We don't have to go anywhere. They just come and show up because, now the Bitcoin space is so influential.
It's really something I've never thought about in that hard about the power of the Bitcoin space already now. And I like actually till this day, as you said it now, it's not a big group of people. And I always said Trump acknowledged that the voter group is so big, but the voter group is not that. It's like most people, and we talked about it, most Bitcoin are held by individuals, but most individuals hold their Bitcoin with exchanges because it's like the quantity of users are in exchanges, but the quality amount quality is held in self custody, and this is where the power is, and that's why all those politicians also come to the conferences, because they recognize how powerful this very small community. If you are 1 year, in 2 years, 3 years very engaged in Bitcoin, most people, how things are a little bit connected. Of course, you're only on the surface, but it's not like a massively big industry where you have to study and then see all the different networks. You get an overview of the industry quite quickly if you are an engaged viewer and you actually talk with people and go to all the conferences and then see, okay, there's like Unchained all the time and there's this company all the time. Like you connect certain dots. This is kind of amazing to me to see that small community have that impact.
And I think some people will point to that and say, this is proof that Bitcoin is really centralized amongst the early adopters. And I think that that's partially true. Like, the early adopters certainly have more Bitcoin than newcomers, but it's also just a nature of decentralization in a free market. So I think there's a very clear Bitcoin adoption kind of funnel, right? You're out there in the world, you've heard about this Bitcoin thing. You're like, all right, I got to get a little bit. You sign up for an exchange, you buy a little Bitcoin, you maybe forget about it for a few years, the price spikes. And then you think, oh man, I remember I bought some Bitcoin on an exchange. You go log in, you see, wow, this is a lot of money. I don't know if I trust this exchange. Like, what are my next options? Then you learn about hardware wallets, you learn about collaborative custody, you learn about self-custody, and you kind of go down that pathway. And as Bitcoin becomes more and more a part of your savings and your financial plan, those options become more obvious. And hopefully for most people, you can come to that decision and understanding before anything bad happens with your custodian or exchange. It's not the case for everyone, but some people learn tough lessons, unfortunately. And yeah, this is just the process of Bitcoin decentralizing. So more and more people over time are taking control of keys. With an hour or two of learning, I think anybody can do it confidently. And again, I talked about this earlier, comparing it to like learning how to drive a car. To drive a car, I mean, it took, in the US, I think it's like a month or two of classes and then an exam, and then you have your permit and so on. So it's really difficult to learn how to drive a car, and everybody in the US drives a car essentially. So I think everybody in the US has the ability to actually secure your keys to Bitcoin. It's just learning a new technology. And yes, the technology is different and you have to be careful, but it's not particularly challenging once you understand it.
This topic of because I hear it more from friends that are more on the social side and are careful to get into Bitcoin of like, hey, it is so unfair that this OGs Bitcoin have so much wealth. I'm getting really almost angry at that because I'm not an OG. Like I missed Bitcoin many times before I actually bought it. And when I bought it, like needed some time to also get deeper in. So I hold Bitcoin since not even 5 years. And it needed some time to actually buy within a significant amount of my wealth in there. But I've been around since about the cycle now. And if you, see, let's say 10 years, let's say the definition of OG is also interesting. If you see like 10 years of an OG, there's so many opportunities to mess it up technically, of like losing your keys, being in the wrong exchange, like all those getting hacked, getting stolen. You can mess all the yeah, exactly. Yeah, like the one thing is for me just the technicality, and then as you said, the selling thing. I just want to point that out to people for because I think we don't talk about that enough, and I'm really curious what you should say to that. I just pulled up for the people that just listen. This is the chart of Bitcoin in the last 9 years from 2016. So if you actually held Bitcoin for like a long period of time, let's say 9 years, you've gone through, let's say, a 2,000, almost 3,000% plus in like a year, and have not sold. And you also have gone through like a 65, 70% drawdown, and you have not sold. And going through that emotional roller coaster of like, oh shit, my wealth is there up, and then it's going down that much again. Honestly, if you held 9 years and your majority of your wealth is still in Bitcoin, you deserve that. Like, good for you.
Yeah, I think everyone, it's that myth of the overnight success, right? Where, you look at Amazon and you're like, wow, that company, overnight success, but it took them 20 years or something to achieve that. In Bitcoin, I think it's much faster. I think you're right. I think it's 1 to 2 cycles. So maybe 5 to 8 years, and you're starting to accumulate a significant amount of your wealth in it. But yeah, it's definitely not easy. I've experienced a few of those 2,000% gains, 80% crashes myself. And that's why they call them diamond hands. They call them diamond hands for a reason. You're not, you're not holding on for dear life. You're calm. You're feeling secure. You know that your Bitcoin is safe. You know the fundamentals of Bitcoin, that there will only ever be 21 million, and that the world is waking up to this. And when you have that confidence and you understand the fundamentals, still not easy, but it makes it better. And for someone like myself, I've been in Bitcoin for a while now. I actually can't imagine storing a significant percentage of my wealth not in Bitcoin. I mean, what would I buy? Here in Austin, the real estate market is taking a hit. Houses they went up a lot in value, but the market is stagnant. People aren't able to sell houses at the interest rates currently. There's some stocks that maybe look somewhat interesting, but there's a lot of risk in the stock market. And I think during, one or many of Michael Saylor's presentations, he always talks about how, something like 80% of the stock market is driven by 7 companies or something like that. And if you don't own the right company, you're probably just treading water. If you're owning an index fund and you're getting 10% or 14% a year, that's, I think, essentially treading water of the real inflation rate of the US dollar.
There's an amazing video that's Michael Seyr has done with a guest talking about the different risk factors when you buy a stock, when you buy basically a security. And he built it in a way where he talked about that's applicable to all companies and also to his own companies. And I've sat through that hour and was like, I can never buy a stock again. It's like there are too many risks involved.
Yeah, people look at me and think, oh man, you're crazy. You have, most of your wealth in Bitcoin. How do you sleep at night? But it actually feels significantly less risky to me than, to your point, gambling on a stock. I have no idea, what these companies are doing. There's a lot of black swan events with, the central banks. They can pull levers that create winners and then create losers. And it just seems more like gambling to me, whereas Bitcoin feels like savings because I know there will only ever be 21 million. I know how keys work. I know how multi-sig addresses work, and I can feel confident. And I feel like that's my edge personally.
Absolutely. How was I wanna, because there are sometimes new people, and I was extremely scared in the first time when you see the volatility. How was that for you when you started seeing the volatility and going up, going down? Did you on some of the tips sell either on the way down or on the way up?
I wouldn't say it was a easy first few weeks. I bought my first Bitcoin kind of near the end of the 2014 bear market. So it was after Mt. Gox collapsed in 2013. Towards the end of 2014 is when I first started learning about Bitcoin. And within a week or two of learning about it and buying some, the price crashed like 60%. So I was like, oh, wow, this is really exciting, like new form of money. And I had enough of the puzzle pieces at that point to understand why I wanted to buy it. And so I bought it. It crashed 60%. I felt like a total idiot, but I thought, I only put a little bit of money in, maybe, half the price. Now I'll get twice as many Bitcoin or whatever. So I ended up just putting a little bit more in and a little bit more and a little bit more. And then slowly, I think, 2015, 2016, the price was very flat. It hardly moved at all, but it started kind of going up a little bit. And it was definitely like a noticeable amount towards the end of 2016 and into 2017, which is when we saw that first run up to 20K. So it felt like, I thought that, any day hyper Bitcoinization was going to happen. And the big thing in 2015 was that the ETFs are going to be approved. Because that's when I believe the Winklevoss twins filed their first ETF. Submission was like 2014, 2015. So all the news on, our Bitcoin, the Reddit subreddit, was about how the ETF is imminent. And it took, a decade later for it to finally get approved. But yeah, I think everyone has to experience the dips in order to forge the diamond hands, is what I would say. And you need to go into Bitcoin understanding that it is extremely volatile and understanding why it's extremely volatile. It's extremely volatile because it has a fixed supply of 21 million and there are no circuit breakers, right? With the dollar, with the euro, with stocks, they can shut down trading. With the dollar, if the price gets a little too volatile, they'll print more money or take money out of the system. With Bitcoin, there's no adjusting anything about it. And so all of the volatility is based exclusively on the current demand for Bitcoin. And once you understand the basic kind of economics and the basic technology side of it, I think it makes holding it through the volatility much easier. And now when it's volatile, I get excited because then I get to save.
How was it living through the ETF launch when you were already excited about it 10 years ago?
I think I tweeted like a month or two before they launched, and I was like, everyone's really excited about the ETFs, but just be ready for them to be delayed for a decade. So I was very cautiously optimistic about them, but I was prepared to wait because again, it was the same emotions that I had, at the beginning of last year as I had in 2015, 2016. I was going into my friends' offices and saying the ETF's going to be approved. We're going to, it's going to go to, I think at that point, 10K was a lot. It's going to go to 10K. My friends would roll their eyes at me, but look who's laughing now.
And it did go to 10K just 2 years ago, 2 years later, right? 2015, yeah. 2017, it hit the 10K without the ETF.
That's right. Yeah, it went to 75K before the ETFs were launched. I believe that was
That's
like
crazy.
Really
it's really great. It also went, before we have a strategic Bitcoin reserve in America, to over 100K. That was also something significant. Imagine imagine America actually is starting to buy, because now, from what I understand, they now just took the Bitcoin they already have and put a different name on there. so yeah, it's a strategic Bitcoin reserve, and I get the meaning behind the different words and what it does. But until they really start to say, hey, we are America and we are accumulating X amount of Bitcoin each year, I think till this point comes, it's hard that it won't be as bullish as now. Now they just say like, oh, like we have that Bitcoin, it's a strategic Bitcoin reserve now.
I think with a lot of politics and just policy in general, it's all about kind of pushing the needle far enough where the needle can't go back. And I think that that's what happened with the strategic Bitcoin reserve is now that it has been established, there's no going back. And it is only a matter of time until, to your point, the administration, whatever administration that is, says, okay, we need to start aggressively accumulating. We have the framework in place. Let's go for it. And I do think, there are some bills currently proposed where the U.S. will begin to accumulate if they pass, but it's just a matter of time. Like even if this round of bills doesn't pass, some will in the future. And it's the same thing for statewide strategic Bitcoin reserves. So there's a bunch of different U.S. states that have proposals for strategic Bitcoin reserves. They will eventually say yes. I think one interesting example of not a strategic Bitcoin reserve, but a sovereign or a pension fund is the Wisconsin Pension Fund. Established or started buying Bitcoin ETFs, I think, when they first launched, and they started with 1%. Now that the value of the Bitcoin has increased, they've actually increased the percentage of Bitcoin that they're willing to hold. And it's always funny how that happens. You're like, oh, I'll start with this percent. And then once you achieve that percent, again, weighing the alternatives, it's like, well, if I'm going to sell it, what am I going to sell it for? Is it going to outperform Bitcoin? Bitcoin becomes your own personal hurdle rate.
This is always because like family members and older colleagues, like 40, 50 years old. I'm now 26. Just when I talk with them, like, oh, this in Bitcoin, and then I'm only in Bitcoin, and they're like, oh, like, what's your exit strategy? What will you sell it for? And I'm like, yeah, exactly. Like, what would I sell it for? What else can I buy right now? Should I buy Euro bonds? Like, what the heck should I do?
Well, I hear there's some beautiful castles and stuff in Austria, so one of them has your name on it.
Yeah, Schloss Schönbrunn would be nice. That would be great. Robin Seyr's palace, but it's a long way to go. I just want to show this to people if they're interested if they're interested in strategic Bitcoin reserves and the state laws, because I was really surprised when I saw this the first time. Julian Farrer, who made that website, gave that to me, and I was super surprised how many bills there are. And it actually goes, I remember this metric was under 80, this metric was under 40, and this was also lower. So it's growing quite a bit. And this is where you can actually nicely see all the bills and where they are. It was super interesting for me, and you can also go to the primary source, and it kind of opened my eyes that it's not just about the Federal Reserve or like the government buying Bitcoin and like accumulating Bitcoin, but the United States of America are many states that can all individually also buy Bitcoin, and that might just be the even more bullish case, because if they do it, it's just also a matter of time till countries in Europe, the countries in other states and nations will also do it.
I was listening to Pierre Richard on a podcast recently. He went on like 4 different podcasts, so I can't remember which one. But one thing he said that was kind of stuck with me is that this policy and this way of legislating Bitcoin adoption is a way of essentially helping people who don't even like Bitcoin or potentially even hate Bitcoin to weather any sort of storm, any sort of like monetary problems that could come up with the US dollar. Because if all of their wealth is kind of, maybe a few layers deep backed by Bitcoin, they're just going to be better off, and they'll be able to, they'll just be able to continue living even if there is some sort of major financial crisis, just simply because Bitcoin has been embedded into the different systems that they interact with, the state level, the federal level, Wall Street, the financial system. Bitcoin's just making its way into everything, attacking on all fronts.
Absolutely, really interesting. One last question that I have for you, especially as a Bitcoiner that is long in Bitcoin. You probably have gone through the journey of, okay, I have Bitcoin, I'm sovereign with my money. How can you be sovereign outside of money? Have you looked into that and was like, okay, how can I be even more sovereign and free outside of just having the best sovereign money?
There are a few different ways that kind of come to mind when I think about that. I think in the US, at least, like owning property is not necessarily a way to be sovereign, at least in Texas, because you're paying property tax for every year, right? You can't stop paying property tax. And so you're never, in my mind, you don't never truly own whatever, property you might have the title to. But when I think about becoming truly sovereign, I think about maybe multi-jurisdictional, either ownership, like a second passport, or owning land in different countries, just so that if something happens in one country, you have other alternatives. But I think, personally, my strategy is just to help upgrade the US so that I don't have to become a refugee. So I want to just embed Bitcoin into as many different systems as possible here in the US so that the country just continues to be prosperous and I don't have to worry about that. I think a lot of folks tend to kind of over-index on the like tinfoil hat and becoming like super sovereign mountain man. And I personally am just an unabashed capitalist. I want to be able to specialize in what I specialize in. And then I want to be able to work with people who are specialists in, defense, in farming, in, real estate, every single industry, right? I think that's how prosperous societies function, is by individuals specializing and then being able to help others. And so that's, maybe not hope isn't a plan. That's what they say. But I really think that my best effort can be put towards just upgrading the US and then making sure that my country is really, really strong and secure.
That's awesome. I love that you bring up flag theory, basically, and Plan B. I made because I noticed that so many people are interested in it, and I just made one video with Katie, and there are many other experts that do that, also the Bitcoin way, and like many other services out there. But I just made with her the video around flag theory and what are options and what you can do and why it's also important.
Another great Austin Bitcoiner, by the way, Katie.
Oh, actually, I didn't know that. That's awesome. But yeah, it's so. It's so important, that topic also. Unfortunately, Austria doesn't allow two passports, but I'm also, I have an Indian girlfriend. That's my second passport.
There you go. Well, I think Austria is also in a great position to adopt Bitcoin and just embed it into all the systems and, maintain its prosperity there.
It would be the home of Austrian economics, but unfortunately, I said it. The previous episode was with Stefan Lavera, and I said it to him also. And when I came into Bitcoin, I heard everyone talking about Austrian economics. And being someone in Austria, I was like, the economics in Austria is not that special. Like, why is everyone talking about that? And then I slowly got to know, like, oh, they're talking about something different. I never heard about Hayek or Mises or anything about that before Bitcoin. Like, Bitcoin teach me that, even though I was in Austria and was going to the educational journey till like 21 years old through like school and then starting university. I also never heard it before Bitcoin.
Same with me, actually. I got a degree in economics, and I didn't learn economics until Bitcoin. I didn't learn about Hayek, Mises, Rothbard. None of those names were mentioned in my economics program at a university in the US.
Super, super sad.
Bizarre.
I have one question to ask each and every one of my guests, and I'm actually not sure if I asked you this last time because I've introduced it somewhere last year. But I will just throw the question to you. Maybe you get it now, second time. What can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
My other major passion right now is mountain biking. So I've actually been mountain biking since 2011 and got into racing, just amateur racing. Yeah, spend a lot of my free time out on the single tracks. I actually just wrote an article, hopefully it will be published this week, called 10 Mountain Biking Tips that will help you understand Bitcoin. So check it out, hopefully on Bitcoin Magazine. The Mountain Bike World Cup season is kicking off this weekend, so I figured it would be a good time to try to marry the two passions, Bitcoin and mountain biking. I was inspired by some colleagues at Unchained who published last year a piece about Bitcoin and golf, which ended up resulting in the Max and Stacy Invitational in El Salvador. So a cool golf tournament was put on. So you never know what happens when you kind of introduce your passion to Bitcoin and put that out there. So that's what I'm hoping to do is see if there's any mountain bikers out there that want to learn about Bitcoin or go for a ride with me in Austin. And I'm pretty happy with the article. I got it reviewed by two pretty prominent mountain bikers. So you'll have to check it out to figure out who it is.
Really, really cool. And at the time of this, when it's released, it will already be out. So I usually do it later, but you probably post it somewhere else on your Twitter, right? You have a Twitter where people can go.
That's right. You can follow me at Phil_Geiger on Twitter. My email address is phil@unchained.com. Feel free to follow me on Twitter. I think Twitter DM is really the best way to get in contact with me. And yeah, would love to talk about Bitcoin, mountain biking, anything else.
It's Twitter TM is also my main platform. I thought about it last time. What do I do if Twitter bans me? It's like all my contacts are there. I mean, probably I can reach out to most of them also with other channels, but like I'm pretty reliant currently on the Twitter DMs.
Yeah, me too. I'm unfortunately also trying to build out LinkedIn, but LinkedIn is not my favorite.
Yeah, it's normal land, but I actually think it's important for Bitcoiners to go out there. I get hate when I say that, but I'm not a fan of we all move to Nostra. I think we Bitcoiners are digital soldiers in an information war, and we have to get where we can get the Bitcoin signal out the best. Twitter actually has a very solid group of Bitcoiners already. So Twitter is for me just a space to connect with other Bitcoiners. YouTube is actually a space where you can actually get to new coiners and like pre-coiners. And like places like LinkedIn, Instagram, and TikTok. Those are the battlegrounds where there are not a lot of Bitcoiners. So I encourage everyone that is new to Bitcoin and wants to start content creating, like go to those platforms first. Like that's where Bitcoiners are needed more than on Twitter and YouTube. Coming from a guy that only makes content for Twitter and YouTube sounds a little weird, but
I agree with you. I think kind of what I said before is just we need to be attacking on all fronts and getting in front of the different audiences. So, there's some statistics out there. You can actually like go and look up the, demographics of different social media platforms. And I recommend just picking the one that is most unlike you and then go and post there and see what happens. And now maybe you want to use a NIM or protect your identity or something like that. But it's really important to get these ideas out to everyone and even to people who aren't necessarily going to be the most receptive to them.
Absolutely. And as you know, we have an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And your last guest asked you an impossible question to answer because there's just so much you can choose from. What is your favorite Bitcoin meme?
It has to be Carlos Matos from BitConnect. Do you know that one?
No, actually not.
Oh, it's a very good one. So it's from 2017, I think. BitConnect was a shitcoin that was just a complete Ponzi scheme. Actually, probably more professional than the meme coins or whatever is popular right now. But he went on stage and was just acting like a crazy man. So look up Carlos Matos, Matos, BitConnect, and there's some great videos. There's, him screaming and him with lasers and stuff. It's awesome. Oh yeah.
Is that guy?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh man,
good. You should just
interesting.
watch the video because it's just outstanding.
Oh, wait. If you have time, we can still quickly do that. I would love to watch it, but I have to unfortunately change to the other screen here, so people can also hear it. Let me just quickly set that up because I'm now. I wanna see that now quickly. Okay. Now,
and I have a question for the next guest.
Awesome.
What's the next country that's going to establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve?
Nice. What would you guess? Which one it is?
I would guess. Ooh, that's really tough. Maybe I don't even know. I want to say like a country potentially in like Africa, but it also might just be Russia.
Oh, sorry. Is that?
Yeah.
That is,
There's more to the video too, but it is just outrageous. It's very good.
there's a 4-minute video of that.
Yeah, well, the intro is good because he really starts to hype up the audience, and then here it is.
Oh gosh, that's super interesting.
It's very good.
Yeah. So yeah, people have something to watch afterwards.
I want to deliver real value to your guests here today, Robin.
I love that. Really cool. Thank you so much, Phil. We already have where people can find you and the next question for the next guest. So thank you so much for taking the time, Phil. Also, thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.